All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into de-dollarization.
De-dollarization.
Yeah, it sounds kind of intense, right?
It does.
So basically, it's this whole idea that the world could move away from using the US dollar,
Right.
like as the main currency for global trade.
Yeah. For everything.
Yeah, for everything. From buying a cup of coffee to like trading oil on the international markets.
Exactly.
We're looking at an article today about the BRICS nations.
Okay.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and their push to ditch the dollar.
Interesting.
And it's not just like some fringe idea.
Right.
These are major economies.
Huge players.
Yeah. And they've got some pretty compelling reasons for wanting to like change the game.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating is this idea of de-dollarization is tied to this bigger concept of dollar hegemony.
Okay.
Which is basically the dominance of the U.S. dollar in the global economy.
Right.
And this has given the U.S. a ton of influence.
Sure.
But it's also had some downsides for other countries.
Like what?
Well, for example, because the dollar is so central, developing nations often need to hold large dollar reserves.
Yep.
And this can actually limit their own economic policy options.
Interesting.
And they're more vulnerable to sudden shifts in U.S. monetary policy.
So it's almost like they're playing by someone else's rules.
Yeah, exactly. Like you think about the 1997 Asian financial crisis or the more recent sanctions imposed on Russia.
Right.
Those are real-world examples of how dependence on the dollar can make countries vulnerable.
Yeah, I remember reading about those events.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about how much power the dollar has on a global scale.
For sure.
But the article also quotes this guy, Jeffrey Christian, who's the founder of CPM Group, and he calls de-dollarization a fad that could backfire.
Interesting.
So if it's so risky, why are these BRICS nations so gung-ho about breaking free?
Yeah. What's the motivation?
What's in it for them?
Well, I think at the core of it, it's about economic sovereignty.
Okay.
They want to call the shots in their own economies.
Right.
And not be at the mercy of U.S. economic policies or currency fluctuations.
Okay, so more control.
It's like asserting their independence on the world stage.
Right.
And creating a financial system that's more aligned with their own interests.
Okay, so it's like they want more control over their own destinies.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But the article also lays out some serious challenges to ditching the dollar.
Sure.
I mean, it's everywhere.
It is.
Most global transactions happen in dollars.
Yeah.
And it's especially important for commodity pricing, like oil.
Right.
Can they realistically break free from that?
Well, let's just say it won't be a walk in the park.
Okay.
The dollar has been ingrained in the global financial system for ages.
Right.
There's a lot of momentum behind it.
Yeah.
The article even quotes Morgan Stanley strategists who believe the dollar's dominance probably isn't fading soon. Even Ding Yifan, an economist from China, agrees.
Okay.
He says China would need to take some major steps to really challenge the dollar.
What kind of steps?
We're talking about relaxing control of their currency and opening up their capital account.
Okay, hold on. Can you break that down for me?
Sure.
What does it even mean to relax control of a currency?
So it means allowing the value of their currency to be determined more by market forces.
Okay.
Supply and demand rather than government intervention.
Right.
Currently, China manages the yuan's exchange rate pretty tightly. To compete with the dollar, they'd likely need to loosen that control, which can be risky.
So it's like they're holding the reins tightly now, but to compete in this global race, they might need to let go a bit?
Exactly.
That sounds like it could be a bumpy ride.
It could be.
And as for the capital account,
Yeah.
what is that?
Think of it as the record of a country's transactions with the rest of the world.
Okay.
Right now, China's capital account is fairly restricted, meaning there are limits on the flow of money in and out of the country.
Got it.
Opening it up would mean making it easier for foreign investors to invest in China
Okay.
and for Chinese citizens to invest abroad. That could bring more money into the Chinese economy,
Right.
but it also exposes them to more global financial risks.
So while the BRICS nations have strong reasons for wanting to shift away from the dollar,
Yeah.
it's clearly not going to be easy.
No.
But the article mentions that India had some problems when trying to buy Russian oil in currencies other than the dollar.
Interesting.
What happens if a country does manage to move away from the dollar?
Yeah.
What are the risks?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
While there might be benefits to de-dollarization,
Right.
it definitely comes with potential downsides.
Like what?
One of the biggest concerns is the disruption it could cause to global trade and financial markets.
Okay.
Think about it. The widespread use of the dollar makes it pretty easy for businesses to do business across borders.
Sure.
Switching to other currencies could create friction and add costs.
So it's like trading in a smooth, well-paved highway for a bumpy back road.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's the risk of economic isolation. If a country ditches the dollar too quickly, they could find themselves cut off from certain markets.
Right.
Or struggle to get financing.
Okay.
Remember, the dollar is still the main reserve currency held by central banks worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Moving away from it could send a signal that a country isn't playing by the established rules.
Right.
Which could lead to higher borrowing costs or limited access to capital.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's almost like trying to join a club and everyone speaks a different language, you know?
Right, it's like you're on the outside looking in.
Exactly. And then there's the question of trust and stability.
Okay.
The reason the dollar has been so dominant is partly because it's seen as a stable and reliable currency, you know, backed by the U.S. economy.
Right.
For any alternative system to really compete, it would have to show that same level of credibility.
Okay.
That means building trust among the participating countries, having transparent rules, and proving that it can withstand economic shocks.
So it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
I mean, the article really highlights how entrenched the dollar is.
Right. But it doesn't really paint a picture of what a post-dollar world might look like.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
could we be headed towards a world with multiple major currencies?
That's the million-dollar question, you know, a lot of economists are wrestling with right now.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible we could see a shift away from a single dominant currency towards a more multipolar system.
Okay.
Imagine a world where, say, the dollar, the euro, the Chinese yuan, and maybe even a BRICS-backed currency.
Wow.
All play significant roles in international trade and finance.
That's a pretty wild thought.
It is.
But wouldn't that just make things even more complicated?
Well,
how would businesses and regular people even navigate a system like that?
It would definitely add some complexity.
Right.
But it could also create more flexibility and resilience in the global economy.
Okay.
Think about it. If businesses had more choices for making transactions, they could spread their risk and not be so vulnerable to the ups and downs of any single currency.
Right. And for individuals, it could mean having more options for saving and investing in different currencies.
Yeah.
Which could potentially protect them from losses if one currency takes a hit.
You know, that's an angle I hadn't really considered before.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much the average person even thinks about the role of the dollar in their daily lives.
It's true.
We use it all the time without really giving it a second thought.
Right, we do.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the global currency landscape is constantly changing. You know?
Yeah.
Whether or not the dollar stays on top.
Right.
Understanding these shifts and how they might impact you is important for everyone.
Okay, so let's bring this back to our listener.
Sure.
Why should they care about de-dollarization and the potential for a multi-currency world?
Yeah.
What's the takeaway for them?
I think it's about being aware of the bigger forces shaping the global economy and how they could affect your personal finances.
Right.
A shift away from the dollar could impact everything from the prices you pay for groceries to the value of your savings and investments. Staying informed means you can adapt and make smart financial decisions in a changing world.
So to wrap things up, here's a final thought-provoking question for our listener.
Okay.
Imagine a world where your paycheck, your savings, your investments weren't tied to the U.S. dollar. How would that feel?
Yeah.
What opportunities or challenges do you see in a multi-currency future?
Good question.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. That's it for our deep dive into de-dollarization. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
Thanks for breaking all that down for us.
Absolutely.
I feel like I have a much better grasp on this de-dollarization thing now.
Yeah.
It's way more complex than I initially thought.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that seems simple on the surface, but there's so many layers once you start peeling them back.
Exactly. And it's definitely given me a new perspective on how much we take the dollar for granted.
Right.
It's like the air we breathe, we don't really notice it until it's gone.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe someday in the future we'll be talking about a basket of currencies with the same casualness.
Yeah.
Certainly a possibility worth considering.
Well, on that note, we'll leave our listener with that image. A world where their wallet might be a bit more colorful.
Yeah.
And a lot more interesting. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into de-dollarization.
Absolutely.
We'll catch you next time.